Hello and welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig Show.
Welcome to one of the internet's best podcasts, where we dive deep into the lives of the extraordinary and fascinating people who leave an indelible mark on our world. Join us as we explore their captivating stories, remarkable achievements, and unique perspectives that shape history and inspire generations. Get ready to embark on a journey through the lives of inspiring people unlike any other.
Hello, folks, and welcome to the show. My name is indeed Avrum Rosensweig. You know, cities are not merely collections of buildings and roads. They are living, breathing organisms, pulsing with ambition, tension, creativity, and memory. They inhale through their neighborhoods and exhale through the dreams of millions who call them home. And like all living things, cities require care, it requires vision and leadership if they are to flourish rather than to fracture. Few cities on earth embody the living complexity more than Toronto, a beautiful place where hundreds of languages echo through the streets, where cultures meet and mingle, where possibility is the unofficial civic religion. It is a city admired around the world for diversity and openness, yet it also is a city that's standing at crossroads. Because today, something in the civic atmosphere feels a little bit different. Housing that once promised opportunity now feels unreachable to many. Grocery bills are climbing and poverty is growing. Infrastructure strained under the weight of growing metropolis, and the roads are jammed, and it's just a little bit harder to get home every day. And perhaps most troubling, a subtle erosion of social trust, the feeling that the kind, easygoing Toronto many remember is becoming harder to find. We are seeing with this one of the fastest growing categories of hate crimes in the city, which is anti-Semitism, a development that raises urgent questions about the safety, the dignity, and the belonging of Jewish Torontonians, and about the moral responsibility of civic leadership in confronting hatred wherever it appears. These are no small issues. And my guest today is someone who has been thinking about these issues, about our city, not only as a politician, but as a city builder, as a son, and as a father. Brad Bradford is a Toronto City Councillor for Beaches, East York, a community known for its civic engagement, strong neighborhood identity, and vibrant local life. At City Hall as a former city planner, Brad has been outspoken on issues that define the everyday life of residents, housing affordability, responsible development, public safety, and the need for municipal government that listens, but truly listens, to the people that it serves. Brad is now entering the race to become mayor of Toronto. So today we'll talk about Toronto, the beautiful city that used to feel a little bit kinder and friendlier. We'll explore the responsibility of leadership and how a mayor can ensure that every community, including the Jewish community, one of the largest in North America, facing rising anti-Semitism, feels safe, feels respected, and able to thrive. And because the future of our city is never inevitable, it is built by decision, by decision, by decision. Brad Bradford, 39 years old, born in Ancaster, Ontario. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Avrum, great to be here. Been a fan of your work and the podcast, and so it really is an honor to get to sit here with you today and have an important conversation about the future of Toronto.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you here too, and I'm excited about your mayoral run, as many people in my community are. But let me ask you a question, Brad, to start things off. With all of that I said in the introduction about the beauty of Toronto, but yet the complexities of it, because of the multiculturalism, because of how it's growing dramatically, perhaps because we can say urban planning wasn't done specifically in a way that allowed for such growth. Why do you want the job of mayor?
I'm all in on Toronto. You know, I often tell people the story. As you mentioned, I grew up down the QEW in a little town called Hamilton. And, you know, I was raised by a single mom. She had us at 6, 5, and 2 on her own. So we didn't have a lot of money growing up. And I still have that core memory for me as a boy coming to Toronto for the first time. My 13th birthday, she wanted to do something special. And she saved up some money to buy us tickets to the Jays. We were up in the 500 section. And we came in on the GO train. And I remember stepping out into Union Station. I had never seen that before. The magnitude of the Great Hall, and then going out onto Front Street and seeing all the skyscrapers, the golden glass of the RBC building. And then we went down to the old spaghetti factory, Front Street in the Esplanade, and we had dinner. And I remember afterwards going out on the street and saying to my mom, it would be incredible to live in Toronto someday. And for me, as a 13-year-old boy, Toronto was that shining city on the hill. You know, it represented all those things that you were talking about, hopes and aspirations and potential. And that honestly, that moment really captivated my attention and my interest. I started playing SimCity, which is a computer game where you used to build cities,
Yes.
and pursued it as an urban player. So, you know, for me today, that city that I saw as a young boy seems a little bit further out of reach. I can remember it, but I don't feel it that way today. And as a father of two young daughters, a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, you know, I think the future of Toronto, that crossroads that you talk about, is so important for us to move in a different direction to create that city that we can be proud of again. But it's got to be a city that can get the basics right, a city where we have safety and security of our persons, a city that you can get around, and a city that you can afford to call home, build a business, and build a life here. And that's what's at stake on the ballot in October 26th.
Brad, in your mind, what happened to our city?
You know what? I think it's not one thing, but it was almost, you know, over the past, whatever you want to call it, 5-10 years, we sort of drifted, right? I think we lost sight of the things that are most important. We lost our focus. We tried to be all things to all people. And I think governments at all levels have the tendency to do this. You know, you sort of spread yourself a mile wide and an inch deep. And as a result, some of those frontline services that are really important, safety, security, transit that's reliable, safe, clean, having good access to high quality park spaces, being able to register your daughters for swimming lessons. Those were the trade-offs. Those things sort of slipped by the wayside. And it feels like that Toronto that I saw as a young boy, you know, now we're just barely stepping over the bar. There's this mentality of, you know, we're shooting for bronze and being content with coming in fourth. And I actually think we need to raise the bar. We need to raise our expectations because, you know, your intro, Avrum, was really beautiful. And I think it captured what Toronto could be. And we could be one of the best cities in the world. And we should be. We've got some of the best hospitals, some of the best universities, the most diverse workforce anywhere. All this talent and capital and investment that's sitting on the sidelines right now. And yet we see people leaving Toronto, fleeing to other jurisdictions for affordability, for safety. And those are the folks who are raising families. Those are the folks who are starting businesses, trying to make contributions. And, you know, again, we have to be a safe and an affordable city and a city you can get around. And that's why I'll be focused on the basics to restore the promise of Toronto that I think all of us want to see realized.
Was it inevitable that these things started to happen? I mean, you know, Toronto has 2.5 million people. The broader GTA has close to 7 million. We have grown so dramatically. And I think traffic is a reflection of that. It's just harder to get home, as I said in the intro. Our population size is huge. Immigration has also grown dramatically. My God, when you take a look at the number of languages in our city, there's 180 languages. There's 250 ethnic origins. Based on sort of the direction that previous leaders implemented of bringing in more and more people, wasn't this just inevitable?
I think, you know, and I can sort of speak to that as an urban planner. We can deal with growth, and there's lots of cities that grow and have, you know, bigger populations than us and perhaps even a faster growth trajectory. But that growth has to be managed and met with the infrastructure and the resources to support the growth. So I know your podcast has a big following, and we're obviously a little Toronto centric today, but it's the reason that you go to an intersection like Yonge and Eglinton, you go to that neighborhood and you literally see signs posted that say, if you're new to the neighborhood, if you buy a unit in this building, your kids might not be able to go to school here. And it's the lack of community infrastructure, whether we're talking schools or parks or libraries, community centers, that have not kept pace with the development growth that puts us out of balance from a quality of life perspective. You know, we collect development charges with every application. There are development charges on every unit of housing. And we could talk a little bit about that because we tax housing more than we tax, liquor and cigarettes. But put that to the side for a second. We do a pretty poor job at getting those dollars out the door to build the infrastructure that supports the growth. So you have this inequity in terms of new development related pressure, but not the infrastructure to support it. And that's going to be a change of mindset here at City Hall, more performance, more accountability to get those dollars out the door to support the growth that we know is actually really important.
In your mind as a councilman, is City Hall running well?
I would say from my perspective as a Torontonian, the answer is no. In my view, the tax bill has gone up significantly. With the current administration, we've had the first and third highest tax hike in Toronto's history. And yet I take transit all the time. It's constantly breaking down. TTC cars often smell like urine. It's not particularly clean or pleasant. So fewer people are taking transit. I just 2 weeks ago, we had swimming registration for swimming programs for my daughter. And I joined hundreds of thousands of parents at 7 a.m. with every electronic device in the household opened and ready to go, smashing refresh, trying to get the girls into swimming lessons. Last summer, we closed pools in our public parks because it was too hot out. So as a Torontonian, as a young dad, I would say we're falling down on some of those basics. And I think as a reform bureaucrat, I used to work in the chief planner's office here. I could tell you we need a stronger culture of performance and accountability, recognizing that we really do need to have more respect for taxpayer dollars. We can't just go back to people and ask for more money all when money is harder to come by for families and for seniors. And so, I think we have to do a better job delivering on the basics, cleaning up the snow in the winter, making sure that our parks are really high quality and taken care of for our residents. And, in an emergency situation, when you call 911, you can actually get through and the police are responding in a time frame that's helpful in an emergency.
Does it surprise you at what you see in City Hall in terms of its day-to-day operations? I'm assuming in 2018 when you came in, your eyes were wide open and you were terribly excited. But over the last 6 or 7 years, you've seen an awful lot. You've been involved in a lot. Is it surprising to you to see the mechanics of the operation?
When I was a bureaucrat and I was in the chief planner's office, I just saw the planning files, right?
Yeah.
I just saw housing and development, things of that nature. As a councillor, I see all the different things, everything from parks and recreation, which is very forward facing for my community and for all our communities. That's a big one. Transportation services, congestion, traffic, the TTC file, higher order transit that works or doesn't work, snow removal. So my breadth of experience and exposure is a lot greater now, despite being trained as an urban planner in cities. Now I see it differently. When I first got elected in 2018, I thought I knew a lot about it because I was a bureaucrat. I understood how council and committee functioned from a process standpoint. But what I've learned over the past 7, now 8 years in my role as a councillor is how do you move the levers of government to get things done? How do you drive a campaign or initiative to build coalitions of support both on the council floor, within the bureaucracy, and more importantly, across the city and in public, a mandate to drive the change that we need to see. So I knew when I was a bureaucrat here, after doing that, for necessarily the most effective way to drive impact and get things done, which is why I ran for council. And over the preceding sort of 8 years that I've been here, I have been focused on the practical. I've been focused on the possible. But as I go out and ask people for their confidence and support in this new role, as potentially as mayor, I'm hearing from thousands of Torontonians about their hopes and aspirations, but equally important, their day-to-day frustration and the friction with City Hall. And that has really focused my priorities on the things that are most important. And again, I go back to a local government that tries to do too much, tries to be all things to all people. Folks just want us to to do a better job on the things that make a big difference in their day-to-day life. And, I always talk about the 3 C's: crime, congestion, cost of living. Those are the things that we need to spend more time on, bringing forward practical suggestions and proposals, not all the other things that often serve as a distraction, coming at the expense of those 3 C's that matter most.
There's a mayoral race, as we've mentioned, coming up in October, which you'll be part of. Olivia Chow is right now, according to the first poll that came out, at about 44%. I think you're about 18 points behind. Michael Ford was included in that poll, which is a bit problematic to many, because in essence, if he stays or if he enters the mayoral run, that could mean a split of votes. How are you going to deal with that?
You know what, like, polls 229 days out or wherever we are not necessarily the best thing to sort of hang our hat on. But I think that this election is going to be about change, and it has to be. The only way you defeat an incumbent mayor, and one who is still relatively popular, is by creating the desire for change and people understanding that the future of Toronto could be different. You don't have to settle for status quo and the way we've been doing it for decades, because yesterday's leaders have not been able to deliver the type of change that I think Torontonians deserve. So the contrast between my approach and Mayor Chow's approach is significant, really, on all the files. My approach in this building is going to be different than anything we've ever seen before, because the incrementalism that has led us to this state of decline is not what is going to drive the type of change to realize that big, bold vision of making Toronto the best city in the world. We're going to have to do it differently. I'm not afraid to do that. Vote splitting, like, anyone can put their name on the ballot, and it's part of our democracy. But I will be going out and all Torontonians across all 640 square kilometers support for a mandate on the change that I think the majority of Torontonians want to see. I had a conversation with Ford this week. Him and I have a lot of shared values when it comes to respecting taxpayers' time and money, when it comes to better services and performance at a city hall. We've known each other since our time serving on council from 2018 to 22. We have a warm friendship and a good relationship. And part of that was sitting down and having a coffee to talk about making sure that we're not splitting the vote too many different ways, and making sure that there is a champion for the issues and for the priorities that both resonate with us. And, I don't know where that's going to land. I know my name will be on the ballot May 1st, and it will be on the ballot October 26th at the end of this thing. And we're building a big coalition of support, and I hope you can be part of that.
We're going to come back a little bit later on to how your mandate, or how you will decide to do things so dramatically different than our current mayor. But let's dive into one of the challenges that is in front of you, and certainly in front of me and the Jewish community, which is anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is growing. It's alive and well, not only in Toronto, but in North America and throughout the world. Hate crimes have grown dramatically in our city, up around 44% over the last couple of years. And or most of that has been directed, or much of it has been directed towards the Jewish community. And that's highly problematic to our members. It's scary, it's uncomfortable, and a lot of people are questioning our leadership here in Toronto, both in the city hall and through the police force, as far as dealing with it. So let me ask you a first very general question, Brad. Why do you think that there's so much anti-Semitism in Toronto?
I as I said, I grew up in Hamilton. There were 4 Jewish people that were, my classmates, my friends. I still actually remember the time this kid Jake, his mom Susie, came into our class in grade 4 and cooked latkes and brought in dreidels, and I thought it was fabulous. Yes. So that was my first exposure to the Jewish community. My wife grew up at Bayview in the 401, so I was the first non-Jew that she ever dated. So she was pretty familiar with the community. But I got to be honest, I was not aware that anti-Semitism was lurking below the surface in what appears to be the case, and of course, it came to the surface post October 7th. And I'd like to say that that wasn't the case, but as you pointed out, you just have to look at the statistics, the increase in hate crimes, hate motivated crimes that are anti-Semitic or motivated by Jew hatred, and it's not the same. And the response here in this city over the past 3 years has been Jewish people have been targeted disproportionately versus anyone else in the city. Those are the facts. That's not spin. Those are just the facts. I think there has been a permission. I think there has been a subconscious permission, if I'm being generous, that has been provided, where there's a culture here in Toronto right now where this stuff is met with a shrug. You think about hate targeting other communities. If somebody was to offer a homophobic slur, it would rightly be met with national condemnation. You'd be fired in the workplace. You'd be thrown out of the bar. It wouldn't be tolerated. If a visible minority group experienced the same thing, you would have universal condemnation, because that's not who we are as Canadians and Torontonians. We don't tolerate that. But we've had 3 synagogues shot up, bullets flying in the past week here in March in Toronto. And it's kind of met with a shrug. And that is just wholly unacceptable. And I think you look at other jurisdictions, Mayor Del Duca in Vaughan, after October 7th, made it very clear hatred was not going to be tolerated. We would have resources in the theater, in the field, to deal with it on site, and not just reporting it and trying to deal with in the courts weaknesses. That's your choice. You can choose to break the law, but it will be met with condemnation and prosecution. We haven't felt or been able to execute on that in the same way here in Toronto. And I do think there is a leadership void here with our mayor. And, I say that on the podcast. I say that to her on the council floor, where this has been allowed to fester like an infection across Toronto in a way I never imagined was possible. So we have to come together as a city.
Why the shrug? Why is Olivia shrugging it away?
Well, I think it's broader than that, but I think we need leaders across the community, and not just political leadership, but in the workplace, in across different interfaith communities, at the hockey rink, in the park. We all have to meet this with strong condemnation, that it can't just be another shrug. It can't just be another episode of, a swastika drawn with a Sharpie marker onto a slide on a children's playground. Like, this stuff has to be met with the same abhorrent condemnation that other types of hate and discrimination are met with. And it's just not. So if you had leadership that was out there condemning this stuff and reiterating, this is not who Toronto is. This is not our identity. This is not in alignment with our values. I think we need to set the tone at the top and make sure that everybody realizes this is not acceptable. It's not who we are. It's not what we stand for, and it's not going to be tolerated. And I haven't heard that kind of message from leadership here at City Hall. A few of my council colleagues absolutely are there in this fight, but it does start at the top. The mayor has the largest bully pulpit in the entire country when it comes to municipal leadership, and we just haven't seen that exercised.
Listen, I went out to my community on Facebook and I asked them for questions to ask you and what they were feeling about anti-Semitism and the way the city is responding to it. There are many people who feel that the mayor is anti-Semitic. Do you think so?
I don't think she is anti-Semitic in that she has, no, I don't think that she's an anti-Semite, but I think that this is a problem that has festered under her lack of leadership. And I it has led to really devastating consequences for community. The fact that we have had neighborhoods protested because who lives there, the
Yeah.
fact that we have had businesses firebombed because who owns them, schools shot up because little Jewish girls go there, synagogues and places of worship, that have bricks going through the windows, and now um, I don't know if you want to call it correlation, causation, but when somebody in Toronto who is elected to serve Torontonians is waxing poetic about conflict overseas, meanwhile there's conflict on our own streets, I think she needs to be more focused on what's going on in Toronto. And I think when she offers, her own personal views, declaration of a genocide, of which, our level of government and her role in this city has nothing to do with that. I think it creates an environment where people feel permission structures to go out and take some of the abhorrent actions that we've seen. And I got to tell you, we have enough problems here in Toronto to be focused on. And her focus hasn't been there. So, no, I don't believe that she is anti-Semitic, but I do believe she has lost the plot in terms of what her job is as a leader. And job number one for political leadership at every level is safety. And the city of Toronto has fallen down when it comes to safety and security of our Jewish neighbors.
Again, I mentioned that I'd asked many of our community members for questions or thoughts for this interview itself, and what I might ask you, what is required in the city according to them, and it seems like consensus is, listen, enforce the rules that are on the books. I live here at Shepherd and Bathurst, and every Sunday for 2 years, there was a rally, a pro-Israel rally, and then right across the street, Palestinian or perhaps a pro-Hamas rally was launched as well. It was vile. It was vile to watch, vile to listen to. There was a lot of hate speech emanating from that rally, not only against Jews, but against Canada. And that was very problematic. They also, many of those people came into our communities and they tried to intimidate us. They would walk through our streets, the side roads here in the area, and be very, very loud, Jews back to the ovens and things like that. And people who say otherwise, I heard it. So what would you do about that, Brad, as a mayor?
Well, again, I've been to the rallies at Bathurst and Shepherd and supported the Jewish community a dozen times over the past couple of years. And I'm always struck, it's not necessarily the easiest neighborhood to get there. So they're not going there because it's convenient. They're going there because that is the largest concentration of Holocaust survivors in the country. And I think that in itself is vile and disgusting. I think that shows where much of the motivation is coming from. I've seen the stuff on the placards. I've seen the impersonation or martyring of terrorist leaders of organizations that they've propped up on the other side of the street. And it's just disgusting. You're right. The bylaws on the books need to be enforced. We're on the Al-Quds Day is coming up here in Toronto. And I know that's a very sensitive subject for the Jewish community because, of course, this was, I don't know if you call it a holiday, but this was an occasion that was brought in by, the Iranian regime with the mission to eradicate Israel. It's disgusting. If I am successful on October 26th, we are going to make sure that all rallies, all marches, all protests are permitted. Right now, some of them are. Like I marched in solidarity, shoulder to shoulder with the Iranian community a few weeks back, 350,000 people on Yonge Street, working with police, both in York Region and Toronto Police, to have a well-run, safe event. No violence, no intimidation, no garbage. We're picking up garbage off the streets afterwards. And I said to my wife after, it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. You had flags from all over the world. You had the Iranian flag with the lion and the sun. And it was very peaceful. But the folks that are involved in some of these other protests or march, they're not working with police. They're not getting a permit. And so if we have a universal approach where all of these things are going to be permitted, then we can enforce the ones that aren't and have that across the board. And I would say my approach on all of this stuff is rule of law needs to be applied equally and universally to everybody. This is the collective bargain that we all sign up for in a Western democracy, in a country like Canada, in a city like Toronto. There is an expectation that the laws on the books are going to be enforced, not when it's convenient, not when it's easy, but universally and equally for everybody. And that does start with the leadership at the top. It starts with serving on the police board as the mayor, which I have committed to doing. The chief reports to the police board. Mayor Chow has abdicated that responsibility. She doesn't sit on the police board. And I feel like that's mayoral malpractice because, again, I go back to job number one for any leader is safety of our residents. And also, as an aside, the largest line item in our budget is the police budget. So you'd think you'd want to roll up your sleeves and be engaged in that stuff. And she has just delegated that to other people. And I would suggest that's a really important role for the mayor. It's a commitment I'm making. It is a decision that she has decided not to do. And that is a key difference. I'll be at the table. I'll be having those conversations and I'll be much more engaged.
So the feds just earmarked $10 million for security for the Jewish community, and that would involve hiring licensed security people, better technology, and so on. I think that was a breath of relief for our Jewish community. Very important and a long time coming. Would you budget more funds for the security of the Jewish community, despite the fact that we're only 4% of the overall population?
Yeah, what I will do is I will invest more in frontline policing than we have been, and I would I'll give Mayor Chow credit. She has actually invested more in frontline police than some of the budgets previously before she got here, but it's actually still not enough. And part of this is also working with the province because there's a bit of a pinch point out in Elmer, Ontario, where the police college is. We actually probably need to work with the province. I think they do 5 classes a year. We probably need a 6th class. Then they come to Toronto and get some of the best training in North America at the police college here in Etobicoke. But we need more frontline officers. And, it's an unfortunate reality that we have to have mobile command centers outside of Jewish schools, outside of synagogues. And you look at the millions of dollars that we're spending in overtime right now to service that need. I think with the state of the world right now and the world that we're living in here in Toronto, that has to be budgeted and accounted for just as a baseline. It's not, it's overtime right now, but we need to expect and anticipate and live in the world that we are living in right now, where that's not just deploying resources on a one-off basis. It's a new baseline. So, the $10 million announcement from the federal government, I think is, symbolically helpful. It's $10 million. It's not nothing, but you talk to the folks at the Miles Nadal JCC, they've probably spent that over the past 3 years in security alone right there, that community center. So, we need to work together to make those investments with all 3 levels of government. I will be doing it with frontline officers and making sure that we have those resources. And it's, again, that's job number one of local government. And those are the basic services that we actually need to be investing in.
Brad, I spoke before about Toronto, the friendly, Toronto, the lovely and the beautiful. And I think internationally we were looked at that way. And we all know that when we travel throughout Europe with our backpack on, that people would say, "Oh, you're Canadian." The first thing they'd say is, "Good, you're not American." But the second thing was they say, "We just love those Canadians," right? And some of it was stereotypical, always apologizing and things like that. But I think at the core, at the soul of our city has always been a great sense of real love for the city, and I would argue for each other. My question to you is, what sort of relationship do you have with the Muslim community, so that you have the ability to bring them together with the Jewish community? I think in a really, really important way, and in a way that's been missed the opportunity that's been missed. It's happened sort of at a grassroots level, but I think it has to be more formal through City Hall. What would you do to bring our two communities together?
I think it's so important, and I think more time needs to be spent healing, bringing people back together, having a unifying moment in Toronto. There's always going to be conflict in different countries and different jurisdictions around the world. We're seeing that right now play out in a number of different theaters. And war is always tragic. Loss of life is always tragic. It's always devastating. But we have to focus on the shared values that we have here in Toronto, in Canada, on the things that bring us together. And I can tell you, I represent Canada's largest Bangladeshi community in Dentonia Park and Teesdale, Victoria Park. I've had long relationships with them since I've been in office. We've worked on shared priorities and initiatives together. Many of them are Muslim, some of them are Hindu. Um, Many people who have come to Canada have been fleeing conflict in different theaters and arenas around the world. And so, it's not lost on the Muslim community what it's like to be targeted, to be hated, to be, attacked because of their cultural or religious identity. You can have that conversation with many of the uncles, with many of the community leaders, with many of the imams. They get that. And so, again, I'm never going to solve conflict overseas in the Middle East. It's not my job. It's not my area of expertise. It's not my position. But I need to focus on bringing Torontonians together, people who have come here and fled conflict from around the world, and focus on what we can do to come together as a city. And I can tell you, when I was meeting with a group of community leaders and imams a few weeks back on the Danforth at one of the local masjids. They understand, hate and persecution because they have experienced it. So focusing on that shared commonality and that recognition that this is bad for everybody. What are the things that bring us together? Not the things that are happening overseas that might drive us apart, but what are the things as Torontonians that we can relate to? And again, you think about the Muslim family that was attacked in London, Ontario a few years back, run over because they were visibly Muslim. Unacceptable. We all collectively condemn that, right? And I know Jewish community out there in London, Ontario, rallied around that family,
Yeah.
rallied around religious leaders at that time, because the Jewish people also understand hate and persecution. They've experienced it for thousands of years. So I would say that there's a lot of opportunity for healing, for shared understanding, and the more that we can tone down the temperature here in Toronto, I think the faster we can get back to a city that is one that we can be proud of, where we are a destination or a bastion for tolerance and acceptance, and a loving city. And it feels like there have been, some actors that have been sowing division and hate. And I think that goes back to the point, Avram, about condemnation. Wherever it is coming from, it must be condemned. We also can't just use our words. We have to use the tools at our disposal so that people know there's going to be consequences. Because right now, I think a lot of people feel like they can get away with it because they kind of can. And that's what has to change. It'll be difficult to put the toothpaste back in the tube, but that's what we have to do. So clear on expectations and clear on the consequences, and make sure that they are brought forward.
Brad, one of my Facebook friends said to me that a barometer of how safe we feel in the Jewish community or otherwise is sending our child off to school in the morning, and how safe we feel with that. Yeah. I have to tell you something, and I don't think I'm discovering America here for you. There's an awful lot of Jewish community members who do not feel safe sending their children off to school every morning, going to shul, going to synagogue, going to temple. Security has been heightened, but it's never enough, as we've seen in Australia.
Yeah.
What I would like to ask you as we conclude the interview is, what is your message to my community, to your community, the Jewish community of Toronto, a soothing one, which we are actually craving to hear from a leader within our community. Tell us what you think, what you feel, just to make us feel a little bit better.
I see you. I hear you. I appreciate your concerns, your fears, your anxiety. spent a lot of time listening about how, people will step outside their front door now and take a look down the street. Is there a car there that I haven't seen before? Folks who are tucking their Star of David inside their shirt. Men who choose not to wear a kippah on the subway, but just wear a baseball cap. I understand where that anxiety is coming from. I don't dismiss it. It is well placed here in this city today. But I would also say Toronto hasn't always been that way. We have, through a lack of leadership, slid into this state of the city where Jew hatred and anti-Semitism has, as I said, been tolerated or met with a resignation. But we don't have to give up. We ought not to be resigned to be a city where this stuff is commonplace. And we are going to push back together on that as members of the Jewish community, but as Torontonians and as Canadians. And we know we've been in a better spot before. We can get back there, but you are not going to be silenced. You are not going to be dismissed. Your concerns are actually the concerns for all Torontonians. Everybody is concerned about safety and security. What has happened undisputedly in the facts and the figures and the data points, what we've seen in the headlines, what we have seen, in the Facebook groups, it doesn't have to be that way. And I am very committed to restoring that unity, that love that we used to have in Toronto. And I think if we all focus on the things that can bring us together, if we are strong in our condemnation of the things that we will not tolerate as Torontonians or Canadians, we can get back to a place where you have safety and security. And it doesn't matter if you're wearing a kippah or a hijab or a turban or nothing at all. We're tolerant, we're loving, we're accepting. And that puts us back on the trajectory to really realizing the greatness and the potential that exists in Toronto.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. It means a lot to me, and I'm sure it means a lot to our community members. I guess the next thing that everybody wants to know is, can you fix the Toronto Maple Leafs as well?
That's another thing that's above my pay grade. So no, I'm not taking ownership over that. Yeah.
Brad, for the last few months, I've been asking AI to develop poetry or a poem for my guests. And indeed, I have an ode to Bradford today. Would you like to hear it?
Oh, that'd be lovely. That's fun. That's fun.
Welcome to the show, folks, where cities breathe and grow, where towers rise like verses and streetlights softly glow. A city is not pavement, not steel, nor brick alone. It's millions of quiet stories a restless place has known. Toronto stands among them, a chorus wide and grand, where languages like rivers have crossed from distant land. 100 hopes arriving with courage in their stride to build a life together along Lake Ontario's side. Yet lately something lingers. There's a weight within the air. The homes once meant for dreamers grow harder now to share. The cost of living climbs while patience runs thin, and crowded roads remind us how fast the years rush in. And somewhere in the murmuring beneath the city's light, old hatreds cast their shadows where there should be only right. Anti-Semitism whispers where dignity should stay, a test for those who lead us to firmly say, no way. So cities ask their questions when standing at the seam between the past we cherish and tomorrow's fragile dream. Who steps into the moment where leadership is due? Who helps a restless city remember what is true? Bradford knows these streets, their struggles and their tone. A planner first by calling long thinking how they're grown. He studied how a city must balance change and care, so family shop and neighborhoods all find their future there. In Beaches, East York, he listens where the lake winds softly roam, where civic pride still lingers in every porch and home. He speaks of safer evenings, of housings built with sense, of leaders who remember that listening is immense. At 39, he walks the path where quiet hopes begin, a father watching futures in the lives of his children live in. He speaks of Toronto not only as a place upon a chart, but as a city written deeply in the chambers of his heart. And somewhere in that devotion, steady, patient, and true, lives the belief the city can become, again, something anew. That's for you.
That's really beautiful. You got to send me that.
I will send that to you.
It was very thoughtful.
So I want to thank you really a lot. Firstly, for your time, because I know how busy you are, and I really appreciate you coming on my show. And I also Well, absolutely. And I also want to thank you very much for your compassion towards the Jewish community and, of course, Toronto in general. It's really, really special to hear words of devotion and of love and of deep understanding. So, we say in Yiddish, Yesher Koach, which means well done, go on a straight path. And on behalf of my community, I want to thank you so much for that.
Thanks, Avrum. And thanks, for the advice and mentorship and support that you've offered to me along the way. It's a difficult road that we are all walking right now, but we hold hands, we walk it together, and we know we're headed in a better direction. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank my viewers and listeners for watching and for listening. As my mother used to say, of blessed memory, Zeigazin, go in good health until we meet again. Thank you so much.